Hollywood had one face for the cameras and another when the lights went out. In Los Angeles during the Golden Age, there were nightclubs where the back doors mattered more than the front entrances. Places where contracts got sealed with champagne and parties ended with secrets nobody could speak about. Names like the Mocambo, Ciro's, and the Clover Club weren't just entertainment spots. They were territories where the biggest stars made deals that never appeared in any official document. Studio executives took aspiring actresses to private booths. Married actors met with companions they could never acknowledge publicly, and producers handed over suitcases of cash for arrangements the IRS would never know about. Whatever happened in those private rooms stayed there, even decades later. The stories that did escape paint a picture of an industry where power operated without consequences, and where silence was the most valuable currency anyone could offer. The Mocambo on Sunset Strip was glamorous club in Los Angeles from 1941 onward. With its exotic decor featuring cages with live tropical birds and a dance floor packed with stars every night, it looked like the perfect place to see and be seen. The main room sparkled with sequins and champagne. But the real business happened in the upstairs booths where studio executives like Louis B. Mayer took young actresses to discuss what he called career opportunities. Lana Turner was famously discovered at the Mocambo, sipping a soda at the counter when a talent scout approached her. That story got told 1,000 times in magazines. But other girls who climbed those stairs to meet with producers didn't walk away with the same luck. The waiters at the Mocambo quickly learned not to ask questions when they saw executives disappear for hours with aspiring starlets who later returned with red eyes and ruined makeup. Frank Sinatra was a regular at the Mocambo with Ava Gardner, and their fights became as legendary as their reconciliations. In 1948, Sinatra destroyed an entire table after seeing Ava flirt with another man across the room. Glasses shattered, chairs overturned, and the whole club went silent. Owner Charlie Morrison never pressed charges because he understood that public scandal would destroy his business. Silence was part of the service at the Mocambo, and Morrison made sure every employee understood that policy from day one. The Mocambo closed in 1958, but the stories of what happened inside its private rooms kept circulating for decades afterward. Former employees would tell friends about the things they witnessed, always careful never to put anything in writing. Ciro's opened in 1940 on Sunset Boulevard, and quickly became direct competition for the Mocambo. Herman Hover, the owner, understood perfectly that discretion was the most valuable product he could offer his clientele. The stars arrived through the main entrance for the photographers waiting outside, but the truly important clients used the side door that led to a dark alley. That's where executives arrived with secretaries who weren't their wives, married actors with male companions, and producers with actresses who were supposedly studying scripts until 4 in the morning. The club had a perfect warning system. If a journalist showed up without an invitation, the lights would blink 3 times, and everyone knew they had exactly 2 minutes to behave appropriately or vanish through the emergency exit. The system worked flawlessly for 17 years. In 1949, Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall held their wedding celebration at Ciro's, a respectable public event that got covered in all the papers. But that same night, upstairs in a private room, Charlie Chaplin was meeting with a 17-year-old aspiring actress who thought she was getting her big break. What actually happened in that meeting depends on who tells the story, but the girl never appeared in any of Chaplin's films. Employees at Ciro's saw everything: suitcases filled with cash for under-the-table payments, secret encounters between married stars who arrived an hour apart and left through different exits, private parties where alcohol was the least dangerous substance being consumed. One bartender later said he learned to make drinks while keeping his eyes on the glasses and never on the customers. When Ciro's closed in 1957, many people in Hollywood sighed with relief. The secrets finally had a tomb. The Clover Club wasn't glamorous like the Mocambo or Ciro's. It was an illegal gambling den on Sunset Boulevard, operating openly. The Los Angeles police knew exactly where it was, but monthly bribes ensured there were never any raids. Clark Gable was a frequent customer, arriving after midnight to play poker at tables where the minimum bet started at $5,000. But the real attraction of the Clover Club wasn't the cards. It was the private rooms on the second floor where the darkest deals got sealed with handshakes and veiled threats. That's where Bugsy Siegel met with Hollywood executives to discuss investments that mixed legitimate movie financing with mob money. In 1936, a Warner Brothers producer lost $100,000 in a single night and couldn't pay. He disappeared for a week, and when he came back, he suddenly had the money and never spoke about where it came from. The Clover Club also served as a crisis management center for keeping scandals out of the newspapers. When an important star got arrested for what the police reports called indecent behavior, The phone calls got made from the club's private lines. Lawyers arrived within the hour, cash exchanged hands, and the charges disappeared as if they'd never existed. The system worked because everyone involved understood that today's favor might be tomorrow's insurance policy. The FBI finally shut the Clover Club down in 1948, but by then it had already laundered millions in dirty money and facilitated enough illegal deals to fill several federal files. Some of those files are still sealed today. The Trocadero opened in 1934 and was the first truly elegant club on the Sunset Strip. Billy Wilkerson, the owner, also ran the Hollywood Reporter, which meant he controlled both where the stars had fun and what got written about them afterward. That combination of power was lethal, and Wilkerson knew exactly how to use it. Joan Crawford had a permanent table at the Trocadero every Tuesday night, arriving with her inner circle and a rotating selection of guests. Waiters said Crawford hosted her own private parties in the upper balcony, events where only women were allowed and nobody spoke about them the next day. Barbara Stanwyck also frequented the Trocadero, and the rumors about her private life found plenty of fuel in those late nights. In 1938, a photographer managed to capture compromising images of Stanwyck leaving the club with a woman known in discreet circles around Hollywood. The photos showed them holding hands and getting into the same car at 3 a.m. The pictures were never published because Wilkerson bought the negatives for a sum the photographer couldn't refuse. The money arrived in cash the next afternoon, along with a suggestion that it would be healthier for everyone if the photographer took an extended vacation to San Francisco. The Trocadero was also the stage for legendary public fights. Bette Davis slapped Joan Crawford in 1945 right in the middle of the main dining room in front of the entire clientele. It was a public explosion of a rivalry that had been building for years. The club closed in 1947, victim of newer competition and its own reputation, stained by too many scandals barely contained. The Garden of Allah was technically not a nightclub, but a bungalow complex on Sunset Boulevard. Yet it functioned as headquarters for Hollywood's wildest parties from 1927 onward. Tallulah Bankhead practically lived there, turning her bungalow into a command center for gatherings that lasted for days. The central pool was famous for late-night swimming at 3 a.m, with Errol Flynn leading groups of actors and actresses in competitions to see who could behave the most outrageously. F. Scott Fitzgerald rented a bungalow in 1937 while working as a screenwriter, and what he saw there deeply disturbed him. He wrote letters to friends describing parties where alcohol flowed without stopping, couples formed and broke apart within hours, and where the concept of decency simply didn't exist. He called it a glimpse into hell wearing evening clothes. Robert Benchley lived at the Garden of Allah almost permanently, and his bungalow became known as the laboratory because of the substances that got experimented with inside. Dorothy Parker visited often, and her sharp commentary about what she witnessed circulated through literary circles, though she was always careful to keep names out of her public writing. In 1942, a young actress tried to press charges over something that happened to her at a Garden of Allah party. The exact details never became public because lawyers arrived fast, offered her money and a small film role, and she withdrew everything. The complex was demolished in 1959, but its legacy as the epicenter of excess remained burned into Hollywood history. The stories were too numerous and too consistent to be dismissed as exaggeration. The Colony Club in New York was the territory of the East Coast elite, the place where stage stars heading to Hollywood kept their connections alive. It opened in 1922 with a simple policy. If you weren't important enough, you didn't even see the door. Tallulah Bankhead was absolute queen there before she moved to Los Angeles. Her arrivals were events in themselves. She'd shout obscenities that made everyone laugh and behave in ways that would have meant immediate arrest anywhere else. The Colony Club had private rooms in the basement where the truly shady business got handled. Broadway producers took investors there to close deals, with chorus girls providing the entertainment. In 1934, a club member died of a heart attack during one of these private meetings, and the body got discreetly removed through the back exit before anyone called the police. The family never knew where he actually died. The official story said he collapsed on the street. The club also served as neutral ground for meetings between Broadway producers and organized crime figures, who financed many productions in exchange for creative ways to launder money. The arrangement worked for everyone involved. The shows got funded, the money got cleaned, and the audience never knew the difference. When Hollywood began dominating entertainment in the mid-1930s, the Colony Club lost relevance and closed in 1936. But its short life left enough stories to fill libraries. Former members would occasionally mention it in interviews decades later, always careful to keep the details vague. Romanoffs opened in 1941 and became Humphrey Bogart's favorite club. He practically lived at his usual table near the back. Mike Romanoff, the owner, was an imposter who pretended to be a Russian prince, but everyone knew the truth and nobody cared. What mattered was that Romanoff understood the value of silence and never under any circumstance allowed journalists near his important clients without explicit permission. The club became the unofficial executive dining room for the studios, where bosses took directors and stars to negotiate contracts in what seemed like a relaxed environment. But after 9 at night, Romanoffs changed completely. The private parties in the back room were legendary for their lack of limits. In 1947, Joan Crawford hosted a gathering there and invited only men under 25. The rumors about what happened that night fueled gossip for months. One guest later said Crawford had interviewed each young man like she was casting a film, asking increasingly personal questions while the alcohol kept flowing. Errol Flynn used Romanoffs as what he called his hunting base. He'd arrive early to identify the youngest women in the room, then invite them to private parties that usually ended at his Mulholland Drive home. The waiters at Romanoffs perfected the art of selective blindness, a skill that guaranteed extraordinary tips and job security. The club survived until 1962, when Romanoff finally retired and sold the business. He died in 1971, taking countless secrets with him. Inside the Ambassador Hotel was the Coconut Grove. With its artificial palm trees and exotic decor, it was where Hollywood celebrated the Oscars and other official events. But the public face of the Coconut Grove was only a fraction of its true history. Charlie Chaplin reserved private booths where he spent hours with young actresses, promising them roles in his films while his real intentions were something entirely different. The girls left those meetings silent, some crying, others simply confused about what had just happened. Nobody complained publicly because everyone understood that complaining meant the end of any Hollywood career before it started. The Coconut Grove also hosted studio-organized parties where newly signed starlets got introduced to executives and producers. It was a meat market disguised as a social event, and everyone involved knew exactly what was happening. In 1943, a 19-year-old actress tried to escape one of these parties and was physically stopped by hotel security. They suggested it would be better for her career if she returned to the gathering. She obeyed. Decades later, in an interview for a book that never got published, she told the entire story with names and specific details, but the lawyers buried the manuscript before it reached any publisher. The Coconut Grove kept its glamorous reputation for 68 years, but for those who knew the full truth, it was simply another place where power operated without consequences, and where the dreams of young girls went to die. Chasen's opened in 1936 and quickly became the favorite restaurant of Hollywood's biggest stars. Dave Chasen, the owner, personally cooked for clients like Alfred Hitchcock and Elizabeth Taylor. But Chasen's was more than excellent food. It was a fortress of secrets where stars could escape public scrutiny completely. The private booths in the back had thick curtains and signal systems to warn when unwanted people entered the restaurant. Joan Crawford showed up 3 or 4 nights a week, always with different company and always demanding the same private booth where nobody could see her from the main dining room. Chasen's staff signed confidentiality agreements before getting hired, unusual for a restaurant but absolutely necessary given the clientele. In 1952, a waiter tried to sell information about the customers to a tabloid. He disappeared before the article could be published. Nobody ever knew exactly what happened to him, but the message to the rest of the staff was perfectly clear. Clark Gable reserved the second-floor private dining room for parties that began as civilized dinners and ended in behavior that was anything but civilized. Marilyn Monroe dined at Chasen's with Joe DiMaggio during their brief marriage, and employees witnessed explosive fights followed by equally intense reconciliations. The kitchen staff learned to time their service around the couple's emotional rhythms. Chasen's finally closed in 1995, ending nearly 60 years of serving the best dishes and hiding the worst secrets in Hollywood. The Black Cat Bar in Silver Lake was completely different from the glamorous clubs of Sunset Boulevard. It opened in 1943 and was one of the few places where Hollywood's gay community could gather with relative safety. William Haynes went to the Black Cat after MGM ended his career for refusing to hide his relationship with Jimmy Shields. He found there a space where he could be openly himself. The bar was neither elegant nor pretentious. It was a necessary refuge in a time when simply existing could destroy your life. But even the Black Cat wasn't truly safe. Police raids were frequent, with officers arresting dozens of men under charges of indecent conduct. In 1946, Rock Hudson got arrested in one of those raids, years before he became a star. His studio had to pay serious bribes to erase the record completely. The Black Cat's customers created warning systems to survive. Coded knocks on doors, keywords that signaled when it was time to run out the back entrance. The courage required to simply walk into that bar in the 1940s was immense, knowing your career and your life could end in a single night. The Black Cat closed in 1963, but its historical importance as one of the first openly gay spaces in Los Angeles remains significant. For classic Hollywood actors living double lives, it was one of the few places where they could breathe something close to freedom, even if that freedom came with constant fear. These 10 nightclubs were more than places of entertainment. They were territories where normal rules got suspended, where power operated without witnesses, and where secrets got bought with generous tips and quiet threats. The stars who danced under their lights, who drank in their private booths, and who closed deals in their back rooms, knew exactly what they were doing. Some were victims of a system that used them and then discarded them when they were no longer profitable or compliant. Others were predators who took advantage of every opportunity those spaces gave them. The line between victim and perpetrator wasn't always clear, and many people occupied both roles at different points in their careers. The clubs are mostly gone now, demolished or converted into something else entirely. But the stories persist because too many people witnessed the same patterns too many times for it all to be fiction. Former employees, aging actors, and Hollywood historians have spent decades trying to document what really happened in those private rooms. Some of the truth has emerged, but much remains hidden, protected by non-disclosure agreements, destroyed records, and the simple fact that most of the participants are dead. If this tour through the clubs where Hollywood really lived left you wanting more truth, subscribe because there are many more buried stories waiting to be told. Which of these nightclubs do you think had the darkest secrets? See you in the next video where we keep stripping away the manufactured shine from the golden age of cinema.